The dragon court made Isolde carry the glass coffin because scarred hands were easier to blame than royal ones. 4 guards dragged her into the hall of mourning before the second bell, wrists bound in silver funeral chain, her plain black maid's dress still damp from the washroom floors. The scar, along the left side of her face, tightened in the cold. It ran from temple to jaw like pale lightning, old and uneven, the kind of mark people pretended not to stare at until they thought she had looked away. Today, no one pretended. Every noble in the hall had come to watch the scarred maid touch death. At the center of the chamber waited the royal glass coffin. It rested on a bier of black dragon bone beneath 7 hanging lamps filled with blue funeral flame. The coffin was clear as frozen water and sealed with gold clasps shaped like dragon claws. Inside lay Princess Auralyne, the Dragon King's elder cousin, dead for 12 years, and still beautiful enough to make the living uncomfortable. Her dark hair floated around her face as if the coffin held water instead of air. Her white burial gown had not yellowed. Her hands lay folded over a silver lily. No one had opened the coffin since the night she died. No one lowborn had touched it and kept both hands. That was the story the court liked. Isolde knew better. In palaces, stories were often what powerful people called locks after hiding the key. Lady Varel stood beside the coffin in mourning white, her copper gold hair coiled beneath a veil so thin it seemed made from breath. She was the royal funeral keeper, guardian of burial glass, and the woman everyone once expected Dragon King Theron to marry before grief changed the line of succession. Her face carried sorrow with flawless discipline. "Isolde Vale," Varel said, voice smooth enough to make punishment sound holy. "Scarred maid of the lower mourning rooms, accused of entering the forbidden funeral chamber, touching royal glass, and stealing warmth from the dead princess's coffin." A murmur passed through the court. Stealing warmth. It sounded absurd unless one knew the old rule of funeral glass. Royal coffins did not simply preserve bodies, they preserved last truths. If a living hand touched the glass with guilt in its blood, the coffin chilled. If a thief touched it, the glass darkened. If a murderer touched it, the dead opened their mouth and cursed. And if the coffin cursed Isolde, she would not merely be executed. She would be made to carry the glass coffin herself through the mourning corridor to the execution arch, so every noble could watch the dead princess escort her thief to death. Isolde had touched the coffin 3 nights ago, not to steal, to clean blood from the floor beneath it, blood that had not been there the night before. When her scarred fingers brushed the glass, warmth had pulsed from inside, soft and terrible, like someone breathing against her palm. Then Lady Varel's guards found her. Now the court had decided what the touch meant before the coffin could speak. Dragon King Theron sat on the mourning throne at the far end of the hall. He wore black armor under a cloak lined with ash-gray fur, no crown today, only a narrow band of dark gold at his brow. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dangerously still, with black hair falling loose around a face made harder by sleeplessness. His amber eyes held a tired fire that never seemed to warm him. The court feared his dragon. Isolde had heard servants whisper the truth. The king's dragon did not wake fully anymore, not since the old princess was sealed in glass. Theron's gaze moved from the coffin to Isolde's bound hands, not to her scar, to her hands. The small attention unsettled her, more than cruelty would have. Varel turned toward him. "Your Majesty, if her touch darkens the coffin, her guilt is proven. If the dead princess curses her, the law permits immediate execution." Theron did not look away from Isolde. "And if the coffin does neither?" Virel's pause was brief. Too brief for most. "Note for Isolde. Then the court will know mercy was not wasted," Varel said. Theron's jaw tightened. That was not an answer. The hall went quiet. Virel lowered her eyes. Funeral glass does not protect grave thieves, Your Majesty. A guard shoved Isolde toward the coffin. The silver chain bit her wrists. She stumbled, but did not fall. She had learned young that the court preferred scarred women on their knees, so she stayed standing out of spite, if nothing else. When she reached the bier, the cold from the glass entered her bones. Princess Auralyne looked peaceful inside. Too peaceful. Isolde remembered the blood beneath the coffin. A thin line of it, fresh and dark, seeping from under a sealed thing that had supposedly not changed in 12 years. Theron's voice cut through the room. Why were you in the forbidden chamber? Isolde opened her mouth. No answer came. Not because she feared speaking, because the mourning chain around her wrists tightened until pain shot up her arms. The chain had been spelled to punish servants who spoke against funeral law. Virel had chosen it carefully. Isolde swallowed. Virel smiled faintly. You see, even grief rejects her excuse. Isolde lifted her head. No, it rejects what someone does not want heard. The nobles hissed. Theron leaned forward. For the first time, the blue funeral flames bent toward Isolde. Virel's face went still. Isolde saw it. So did the king. Touch the coffin, Virel ordered. The guards forced Isolde's chained hands onto the glass. Cold struck first, then heat, not fire, blood warmth. The scar along Isolde's face burned so sharply she gasped. Beneath her left sleeve, old white scars she had carried since childhood began to glow, one by one, faint gold beneath the skin. She had always been told those scars came from the night she was found near the funeral furnaces, half-burned, nameless, and unwanted. But the light under them did not feel like burning. It felt like something inside them, remembering it had once been alive. The coffin did not darken. It did not frost. It began to glow. Gold lines spread through the glass from Isolde's hands, cracking the silence inside the coffin without breaking the seal. The silver lily on Princess Auralyne's chest turned red. The court recoiled. Virel whispered, "Impossible." Theron rose from the mourning throne. Inside the coffin, the dead princess's fingers moved. Every breath in the hall stopped. Auralyne's eyes opened. They were not clouded with death. They were gold. Her gaze found Isolde through the glass, and when her lips parted, the voice that came out was thin, broken, and alive enough to terrify the entire court. My stolen blood. The mourning chain around Isolde's wrists snapped. Blue funeral flames roared upward. Theron stepped down from the throne, face stripped of every defense. Virel moved toward the coffin, too fast. Isolde saw the dagger hidden beneath her white sleeve. It was not ordinary steel. The dagger under Virel's sleeve was funeral glass, thin as ice, with a red lily sealed inside the blade. The dead princess saw it too. Auralyne's eyes turned toward the Dragon King. Theron, she whispered through the glass. Do not let her touch my vessel. Do not let her touch my vessel. The words passed through the glass coffin like breath through ice. For one terrible moment, no one in the hall of mourning moved. The dead princess's eyes were open, gold, not gray, living, not empty. Her pale fingers rested against the inside of the coffin lid, and where they touched, frost melted into lines of light. Isolde stood with both hands still on the glowing glass, wrists raw where the mourning chain had snapped. The word vessel moved through her like a blade finding a hidden wound. Not girl, not thief, not maid. Vessel. Lady Virel stopped 2 steps from the coffin, the funeral glass dagger half hidden beneath her sleeve. She lowered her hand slowly, too late to pretend no one had seen. Dragon King Theron had seen, his amber eyes fixed on the blade. Show me your hand. Virel's face did not change, but the blue funeral flames bent away from her. "Your Majesty," she said softly, "the dead have woken under corrupted touch. The proper rite requires containment. The proper rite requires a dagger? A funeral glass blade can sever false warmth from a royal coffin." Auralyne's eyes turned toward her. The silver lily on her chest bled red again. "Liar," the princess whispered. The hall broke into panic. Nobles stumbled back. A priest dropped his ash bowl. Somewhere near the rear columns, a woman began praying in a voice too high to sound holy. Isolde wanted to pull her hands from the glass, but the coffin held her not with force, but with warmth. It pulsed beneath her palms like a second heartbeat searching for her own. Theron descended the last step from the mourning throne. Every movement was controlled, but Isolde saw the strain in him. The tired fire beneath his skin flickered. His dragon was stirring, not waking fully, but pushing against whatever old silence had kept it half-buried for years. He stopped beside Isolde, close enough that the heat of him reached her through the cold air. "Princess Auralyne," he said, voice low, "if you live, speak plainly." Auralyne's gaze softened when it found him. "Nephew," she whispered. The single word hit him harder than accusation. Theron had been young when she died. Isolde knew that from servants' gossip. The princess had been beloved, the last person who could calm the royal dragon line when grief turned their fire violent. Her sealed death had changed the palace. Changed him. Theron's jaw tightened. "Who did this to you?" Auralyne's lips parted. No sound came. The gold clasps on the coffin flared black, and the funeral glass clouded around her mouth. A spell, a seal, a silence, old enough to outlive its victim. Virel moved again. Isolde reacted before thought could stop her. She shifted between Virel and the coffin, though her body shook and every scar on her arm burned beneath her sleeve. Virel looked down at her, as one might look at ash on a clean floor. "Step aside." "No." The court gasped. Virel's eyes cooled. "You do not understand what you are protecting." "Neither do you," Isolde said. "You only understand what you are afraid will speak." The funeral flames surged. Theron looked at Isolde then. Truly looked. Not at the scar on her face. Not at the maid's dress. At the glowing white lines slowly appearing beneath her skin, one scar after another lighting like cracks in buried gold. Virel saw his attention and struck where courtwomen knew how. "Your Majesty, grief is making the hall vulnerable. This maid was found near funeral furnaces as a child, burned and nameless. No family claimed her. No blood record held her. If the princess calls her vessel, perhaps that is exactly what she is, a container for grave magic, not a woman to be trusted near royal death." The words landed. Isolde felt them land, because part of her had feared them all her life. A container, a damaged thing, a scarred body people could place blame inside. Auralyne's hand pressed harder to the glass. "My blood," she whispered again. Gold light shot from the coffin into Isolde's left arm. She cried out as one of her oldest scars opened not in flesh, but in memory. The hall vanished. She saw a chamber 12 years ago. Blue funeral flame. Princess Auralyne alive, struggling against two figures in white mourning robes. Virel stood there, younger, holding the same funeral glass dagger. Another figure remained hidden behind a dragonbone screen, only a man's hand visible, wearing a mourning ring shaped like a red lily. Auralyne screamed as the dagger touched her chest. The red lily inside the blade filled with blood. Then the vision broke. Isolde. Theron caught her elbow, not possessively, fast enough to stop her falling, careful enough not to cage her. The contact sent gold fire through the scars on her arm. Theron's breath caught, and for one instant the shadow of a dragon rose behind his shoulders, vast and half-formed. The court saw it. Virelle saw it too. Her face went pale with rage. Theron released Isolde as soon as she steadied. "What did you see?" Isolde swallowed. The princess was alive when the coffin was sealed. Every noble in the hall froze. Virelle's voice sharpened. "A scarred maid's vision is not testimony." Auralyne's eyes burned brighter inside the coffin. "No," she whispered, "but my coffin is." The glass beneath Isolde's palms turned clear again. Inside the coffin, beneath Auralyne's silver lily, a thin red line appeared across the princess's chest. Not a wound exactly. A seam, the same shape as the red lily sealed inside Virelle's blade. Theron turned to Virelle. "Give me the dagger." Virelle lowered her head. For a breath, Isolde thought she would obey. Then Virelle smiled sadly. "Your Majesty," she said, "I have served your dead longer than you have ruled the living." She lifted the funeral glass dagger. The red lily inside the blade opened like an eye. Every gold clasp on the coffin turned black. Auralyne screamed without sound. "Isolde's scarce." Elle lit at once. Theron stepped toward Virelle, but the blue funeral flames rose between them in a wall. The mourning hall doors slammed shut. The nobles cried out as funeral chains uncoiled from the pillars and locked around the exits. Virelle's soft voice carried through the chaos. "If the vessel wakes too soon, the body dies, forever." Isolde looked at Auralyne. Auralyne looked back through the glass, eyes blazing with trapped life. Then the princess mouthed two words. Not aloud, but Isolde understood them. "Carry me, carry me." The words did not sound in the hall. They burned through Isolde's scars. For one breath, she could not move. The mourning hall had become a cage of blue funeral flame and silver chains. Nobles screamed behind sealed doors. Priests clawed at locked exits. Lady Virelle stood beyond the wall of fire, with the funeral glass dagger raised, the red lily inside its blade, opening and closing like a living wound. Inside the coffin, Princess Auralyne stared at Isolde through the glowing glass. "Carry me." Isolde understood the command and hated how much it frightened her. If the coffin cursed her, she was supposed to carry it to the execution arch. The court had planned to make her punishment a procession, a scarred maid beneath royal death, walking herself toward the blade while nobles watched from both sides of the mourning corridor. But now, the dead princess was asking to be carried for another reason, not to condemn her, to escape. Theron turned sharply toward Isolde. "What did she say?" Isolde swallowed. "She wants me to carry her." Virelle laughed from behind the funeral flames. "Perfect. The vessel obeys the corpse." Auralyne's fingers pressed to the inside of the glass. Gold light flashed through the coffin clasps, then died as Virelle's dagger pulsed red. Theron's eyes burned. "If carrying the coffin breaks the seal, it will not break it," Virelle said. "It will complete it." The room went still enough for her next words to cut. The coffin was made to preserve the princess's last truth. But a vessel of stolen blood can move that truth from glass into flesh. Let the maid carry her far enough, and Auralyne's remaining life will settle permanently inside those scars. The princess will die cleanly. The scarred girl will become a walking prison, and the court will finally have something honest to execute. Isolde's stomach turned cold. A walking prison. The words fit too easily over every fear she had ever carried. Her body had always been treated like evidence of something shameful, something ruined, something no one needed to understand before condemning. Theron stepped in front of her. "No." The word shook the flames. Virelle's eyes narrowed. "Your Majesty?" No one uses her body as a tomb. The gold fire beneath his skin surged, and for the first time, the dragon shadow behind him opened one wing fully. It was vast, but torn at the edges, as if part of it had been trapped in sleep too long. Auralyne turned her head toward him. "My death sealed yours," she whispered. "Theron, froze. The dragon shadow flickered. Virel's face sharpened with alarm. Do not listen. But the princess had found the wound. Theron's dragon had not failed after Auralyne's death by chance. Something in the coffin, something in the funeral glass, had sealed more than a corpse. Isolde felt it through the heat in her scars. The princess's life split, the king's dragon muted, the court's grief arranged like furniture around a murder. Theron looked at Isolde. For one instant, the king's mask was gone. Beneath it was a man who had spent years believing his own blood was weakening, his dragon dying, his grief a private failure. What happens if we carry it? He asked. Not to Virel, to Isolde. The question steadied her. She looked at the coffin, at Auralyne's golden eyes, at Virel's dagger, at the wall of blue flame cutting them off from every safe answer. I think the coffin has to leave the funeral circle, Isolde said. But not to the execution arch. Where? The gold scars on her arm brightened. A path opened under her skin. Down the mourning corridor, past the execution arch, beneath the old burial stairs, to a sealed chamber marked with a red lily and black dragon bone. The first sealing room, she whispered. Virel's expression changed. Only for a heartbeat. Enough. Theron sighed. Isolde lifted her chin. That is where she was cut. Virel snapped the dagger toward the floor. Funeral chains whipped from the pillars and lashed around the coffin handles. The glass coffin jerked toward the execution arch doors by itself, dragging the bier across the stone with a scream of dragonbone. Isolde cried out as her scars pulled toward it. Auralyne's body convulsed inside the glass. Theron seized one coffin handle. Blue flame tore up his arm. He did not let go. Isolde grabbed the opposite handle. The moment her scarred hands closed around it, the coffin stopped dragging. The hall shook. Gold light from Isolde's scars met Theron's dragonfire across the glass. For one breath, the coffin glowed between them like a heart suspended in ice. Auralyne's voice came clearer. Not execution. The mourning hall heard her. The nobles stopped screaming. Witness. The word cracked the blue funeral flames. Theron looked across the coffin at Isolde. She was shaking. Her face hurt. Her arms felt filled with burning glass. But she did not let go. Neither did he. Virel raised the funeral glass dagger again. If you carry that coffin out of the circle, you defile royal death. Theron's voice was quiet and lethal. Then royal death should have told fewer lies. Together, he and Isolde lifted the coffin from the bier. It should have been impossible. The coffin was royal glass, dragon bone, gold seal, and 12 years of buried truth. It should have crushed a maid's arms and bowed even a king's back. But as Isolde lifted, the scars on her body opened into light, not wounds, pieces, fragments of Auralyne's life, hidden beneath Isolde's skin, recognized the glass that had once held them. The coffin grew lighter, not because the burden vanished, but because it was finally being carried by the ones the seal had tried to separate. Theron stepped first. Isolde followed. The funeral chains strained. Virel's dagger screamed. At the end of the hall, the doors to the mourning corridor burst open, not toward the execution arch, but toward the dark stairs beneath it. The court watched the scarred maid and the Dragon King carry the glowing glass coffin together. Then the blue flames behind them formed words in the air. The vessel walks. The body wakes. The murderer follows. The vessel walks. The body wakes. The murderer follows. The words burned in blue funeral flame behind Isolde as she and Dragon King Theron carried the glass coffin out of the hall of mourning. No noble dared block them. That was the first miracle. The second was that the coffin did not crush her. Isolde could feel its weight, but not as wood, glass, and dragon bone. It felt like memory, like grief, Someone had forced into a shape too beautiful to question. Each step sent gold fire through the scars beneath her sleeves, across her shoulder, up the left side of her face. The old pain woke, but it did not own her. It moved with purpose now, answering the princess inside the glass. Across from her, Theron carried the other side of the coffin with both hands, jaw set, blue flame still licking along his arm where funeral lore had burned him. His dragon shadow moved behind him in broken pieces along the walls, one wing sharp, one wing dim, its head lowering each time Auralyne's body stirred inside the coffin. The morning corridor opened before them. It was long, narrow, and lined with black funeral mirrors covered in silver cloth. At its far end rose the execution arch, a stone doorway carved with dragon skulls. Isolde had cleaned blood from beneath that arch more times than she wanted to remember. If the coffin had cursed her, she would have been forced to carry Auralyne there, kneel beneath royal death, and let the court pretend justice smelled different from spectacle. But the coffin pulled away from the arch, downward, toward the burial stairs beneath it. Virel followed. She had no choice now. The blue words had named her without using her name, and every noble eye had turned toward her. She walked behind the coffin with her funeral glass dagger, held low at her side, the red lily inside the blade pulsing brighter with each step. Isolde could feel the dagger, not in her eyes, in her scars. Each pulse made the gold light under her skin flicker, as if the blade remembered every piece it had cut from Auralyne and hidden inside her. Theron saw Isolde flinch. "Is it hurting you?" She almost said no, then remembered the way he had asked, before touching the coffin, the way he had not called her vessel even after the dead princess had. "Yes," she said. His face hardened. "The dagger? I think it knows what it left inside me." The coffin glowed brighter between them. Inside, Auralyne's lips moved. "Do not let the lily bloom." Virel's voice came from behind them, calm again, too calm. "Dead women speak in riddles, because the living want meaning more than truth." Theron did not turn. "You have been very eager to decide what the dead are allowed to say. I have protected this court from funeral madness for 12 years. You protected something," he said. "I am beginning to doubt it was the court." They reached the burial stairs. The air changed at once. Colder, older. The polished walls gave way to black stone sweating with damp. Blue funeral flames, guttered in small niches, shaped like closed eyes. The farther they descended, the more the coffin warmed beneath Isolde's hands. Her scars answered one by one, a line along her forearm, a crescent near her shoulder, the jagged mark beneath her collarbone. Every scar she had been taught to hide began glowing like broken pieces of a single pattern. At the foot of the stairs stood a door of funeral glass, not clear, like the coffin, dark. Inside the glass, a red lily floated. Isolde stopped breathing. Virel stopped too. Theron looked at the lily, then back at the dagger in Virel's hand. "The first sealing room," he said. Auralyne's fingers curled inside the coffin. "Where she cut me," the princess whispered. The funeral glass door did not open. Instead, Isolde's scars burned hotter, pulling her toward it. She shifted her grip on the coffin handle, but Theron noticed. "It wants you." "No," Isolde said, though fear made her voice thin. "It wants what was put inside me." Virel stepped forward. "Then perhaps you should give it back." Theron moved between her and Isolde without releasing the coffin. "Stay where you are." Virel's smile was almost pitying. "You think you are protecting the Maid, but every breath the princess speaks through her drains what little remains of Auralyne's life. The vessel cannot hold her forever." "Then open the room." "I cannot." The red lily in the door pulsed. Auralyne's voice sharpened. "She can." Theron's eyes locked on Virel. The funeral keeper's hand tightened around the dagger. Isolde understood then. The dagger, was not only a weapon, it was a key. The red lily inside the blade matched the red lily in the door because both had been filled with the same stolen blood. Auralyne's. Theron's dragon shadow rose behind him, larger now, furious and half-starved. Open it. Virel's softness vanished. If that room opens, the court will not find a simple murder, she said. It will find a succession, wound your bloodline cannot survive. Theron's answer was immediate. Then, let it bleed. Virelle struck, not at Theron. At Isolde. The funeral glass dagger flashed toward her glowing scars, red lily blooming inside the blade. Theron lunged, but the coffin between them slowed him. Isolde let go of one handle. The coffin tilted. Auralyne gasped inside the glass. Virelle's blaze sliced toward Isolde's chest. Then the scars on Isolde's left arm opened in gold. Not flesh, light. A hand made of funeral fire caught Virelle's wrist before the dagger touched her. The hand was not Isolde's. It was Auralyne's. The dead princess's eyes blazed through the coffin. My blood is not yours to harvest again. The dagger cracked. The red lily inside it split into 3 glowing petals. One shot into the funeral glass door, one into the coffin, one into Isolde's scarred arm. The door screamed open. Beyond it waited the first sealing room, untouched for 12 years, and on the floor, carved in dried gold blood, was a circle large enough for a coffin, a body, and a child. Isolde stared at it. A child. Then Auralyne whispered through the glass, softer than before. That was where they made you. That was where they made you. The words did not echo. They sank. Isolde stood at the threshold of the first sealing room, with one hand still gripping the tilted coffin, and the other pressed against the glowing scar on her arm. Beyond the open funeral glass door, the chamber waited in blue flame and old blood. Its walls were black dragonbone. Its ceiling was low. At the center of the floor lay a circle carved in dried gold, wide enough for a royal coffin, a dying body, and a child small enough to be held down by 2 hands. Isolde could not breathe. Theron looked at the circle, then at her. Not with horror. That almost broke her. Horror, she understood. Horror had been the first language the court spoke to her face, but Theron looked at her as if something had been done to her, not as if she herself was the wrong thing. Virelle stood behind them, clutching the cracked funeral glass dagger. The red lily inside the blade had split into 3 petals, and only one remained trapped in the glass. Her perfect morning face had lost its color. Do not listen to her, Virelle said. The princess has been sealed between death and memory for 12 years. She does not know what she says. Auralyne's fingers dragged against the inside of the coffin lid. Gold light followed them. I remember the knife. The coffin warmed beneath Isolde's hands. I remember the child. Isolde closed her eyes. A vision struck. The first sealing room filled with people in mourning white. Virelle stood beside the coffin, younger and desperate, holding the funeral glass dagger with both hands. Princess Auralyne lay on the floor inside the gold blood circle, not dead, but weakened, her chest cut open by the red lily blade. A small child cried beside her, scarred already along one cheek, wrists bound in cloth. Isolde. No, not yet, Isolde. Auralyne reached toward the child. Do not use her, Virelle's voice answered, shaking with fury. Your bloodline dies tonight, or mine never rises. Another figure stood behind the dragonbone screen, the same hidden figure from Isolde's earlier vision, a man's hand, a mourning ring, shaped like a red lily. He spoke only once. Split the life, seal the body, leave the vessel low enough, no one will search her. The dagger descended. Auralyne screamed. The child screamed too. Gold light broke from the princess's chest and scattered into the child's skin, burning scar after scar across her small body, until the room smelled of glass, blood, and living fire. The vision ended. Isolde. Theron caught the coffin before it could slip. His eyes had gone molten. "Who was the man?" he asked. Auralyne's gaze moved toward the wall behind Virel. Not at Virel, past her. The blue flames lifted, revealing a carved funeral ledger sealed into the dragon bone. Its cover was glass, its pages pale as skin. Virel moved too fast. She lunged for the ledger with the broken dagger. Theron released one coffin handle and caught her by the wrist. This time, he did not hesitate. His dragon shadow surged behind him, larger and darker, gold fire threading through its torn wings. "Enough," he said. Virel's eyes flashed. "You think this truth frees you? It destroys you. Auralyne was not merely your cousin. She was the last bearer of the old funeral blood. If she lived, your father's succession law was false. If she named a child by blood, half your court would owe that child a kneel." Theron looked at Isolde. The words struck the room into silence. A child by blood. Isolde felt the old scars on her body pulse. Not random, not burns. Inheritance cut into pieces and hidden under a maid's skin. She almost stepped back. From the coffin, from Theron, from herself. "I am not a princess," she whispered. Virel laughed softly, cruelly. "No, you are worse. You are proof." The word landed like a sentence. Proof could be loved less than a person. Proof could be locked away, displayed, destroyed, used. Theron's voice cut through the cold. "She is not proof," Virel sneered. "Then what is she?" Theron looked at Isolde again. He did not answer for her. That mattered more than the defense. Isolde forced herself to face the ledger. "Open it." Virel went still. Theron looked at her. "Do you choose that?" The question steadied her, more than his hand could have. Isolde nodded. "If my scars are someone's prison, I want to know whose key made them." Auralyne closed her golden eyes inside the coffin, and for one breath, relief softened her death-pale face. Theron dragged Virel back from the ledger. Isolde placed her glowing hand on the glass cover. It opened at once. The pages turned by themselves until they reached a record, written in gold-brown blood. Sealing right of Princess Auralyne Vere. Body preserved. Voice limited. Life divided. Vessel prepared from stolen blood. Name of vessel: unnamed furnace child. Purpose: conceal living claim until succession stabilizes. The next line had been scratched nearly through. Authorized by Lord Funeral Regent Caravan Vere. Theron stopped breathing. The name changed the room. Caravan Vere had been Theron's father, the late king, the man whose death had placed Theron on the throne. Virel smiled through tears now. "There. Do you see? I did not create your crown's lie. I only kept it alive." Theron's face went ashen. His dragon shadow flickered. Isolde felt the coffin grow heavier. Auralyne whispered from inside the glass. "Theron." He did not look at her. His gaze stayed on the ledger, on his father's name, on the truth that his reign had been sealed with a woman split between coffin and child. Virel twisted the dagger in her own grip until the remaining red lily petal glowed. "Choose carefully, Your Majesty," she said. "Free her, and you free the claim your father buried. Save your throne, and the vessel carries the princess quietly back to death." Isolde's scars dimmed. For the first time since the coffin had woken, fear truly took her. Not fear of execution. Fear that Theron would look at her and see a throne-breaking problem before he remembered she was a woman. Theron lifted his head slowly. His amber eyes found hers. Then he stepped away from the ledger, away from Virel, away from the coffin's old law, and stood beside Isolde. My father's lie does not get to use her body twice. The coffin blazed gold. The ledger pages whipped open to a blank sheet, and in blood-bright letters, a new line wrote itself. The vessel may refuse. The vessel may refuse. The new line burned across the funeral ledger in blood-bright letters. For the first time since Isolde had been dragged into the hall of mourning, the room did not feel built around her condemnation. It felt as if some old law had blinked, startled to discover the body it had used could answer back. Virel stared at the page. Her face changed slowly, not into fear, but into calculation. "No," she said softly. That clause was never completed. Auralyne's eyes opened wider inside the coffin. Gold light spread beneath her skin, thin and fragile, like sunrise trapped under ice. "Because they never asked the child," she whispered. Isolde could not look away from the words. "The vessel may refuse, not Maid, not scar, not proof, not prison, betrayal." Even the mercy of the law still named her as something made to hold another life. The realization hurt more than she expected. Freedom offered through a cruel word was still freedom, but it left teeth marks. Theron stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat of his dragon fire, but he did not touch her. His father's name still stained the ledger page. Lord Funeral Regent Caravan Vert, the king who had split Auralyne's life, hidden it inside a nameless child, and built Theron's reign over the silence. Theron's voice was low. "What happens if she refuses?" The ledger pages shivered. Auralyne answered before Virel could. "Then my life cannot be forced to remain in her scars." Isolde's breath caught. "And you?" she asked. The princess's face softened. That frightened Isolde more than any curse. "I do not know." Virel stepped forward, the cracked funeral glass dagger still in her hand. Only one red lily petal remained inside the blade now, pulsing with stolen blood. "She knows. She simply will not say it. If you refuse, scarred girl, the princess may die. Truly this time. Her remaining life has rested in your body for 12 years. Do you think truth is gentle because it finally speaks?" Isolde's hands went cold. There was the trap. Not chains now. Guilt. If she accepted, she remained a walking prison. If she refused, Auralyne might die. The court had always known how to make powerless women confuse sacrifice with virtue. Theron turned toward Virel. "Do not." Virel's smile sharpened. "Do not what, Your Majesty? Tell her the cost? You were so eager for truth a moment ago." "She deserves truth without your hand around its throat. And you deserve a throne without pretending your compassion has no hunger." Virel looked between them, eyes bright with venom. If Auralyne wakes fully, succession opens. If Isolde refuses, Auralyne may vanish. If Isolde accepts, the old claim remains sealed inside a maid no court will follow. Every path saves someone and destroys someone else. That is what royal blood is. The coffin dimmed. Isolde felt every scar on her body ache at once. Theron's dragon shadow rose behind him, but it did not attack. It bent toward the coffin, toward Auralyne, toward Isolde, as if it had been starved for the same missing truth. Auralyne lifted one hand inside the glass. Isolde. The sound of her name in the princess's mouth was gentler than "my stolen blood." It nearly broke her. "I did not choose you," Auralyne whispered. "That is my grief, not your debt." The room fell silent. Even Virel stopped moving. Auralyne's golden eyes filled with pain. "I was cut. You were cut. They made you hold what they stole from me. But stolen blood is not the same as owed blood." Isolde's throat tightened. All her life, people had acted as though her scars were a debt she owed the world for not being beautiful, not being noble, not being easy to look at. Now the dead princess inside the coffin was saying the opposite. Theron looked at Isolde. You choose. Virel gave a soft laugh. How touching. And if her choice breaks your reign? Theron did not look away from Isolde. Then my reign should have been built on less glass. The coffin blazed. The funeral ledger turned another page. A map of the first sealing room appeared in red-gold lines. Coffin circle, child circle, blood channel, dagger mark, dragon bone screen. At the edge of the diagram was a smaller seal Isolde had not noticed before. A second vessel. No, not vessel. A hinhåller. Theron saw it too. What is that? Virel moved. This time, she did not lunge for Isolde. She drove the remaining red lily petal of the funeral glass dagger into the ledger. The page screamed. Blood-red cracks raced across the book and into the floor. The first sealing room shook violently. The coffin slid toward the gold blood circle at the center, dragging Isolde with it through the light in her scars. Theron caught the coffin handle and braced himself. Virel. She stood beyond the trembling ledger, hair coming loose from beneath her veil, face no longer gentle or composed. You do not understand, she said. Auralyne was not the only one split that night. The second seal on the ledger burned brighter. Isolde saw a flash. The hidden man behind the dragonbone screen, Caravan Vare, placing something small into Virel's hands. A red lily ring, a promise, a command. Keep the false death alive, and you will sit beside my son. Virel's eyes filled with tears, but they did not soften her. I gave 12 years to a coffin. 12 years guarding the truth that would destroy me if it woke. Do you think I will let a scarred maid walk in and become holy because the dead finally learned regret? The floor cracked beneath her feet. The coffin dragged harder toward the blood circle. Auralyne cried out. Gold light began peeling from Isolde's scars, pulled toward the coffin's seal. Theron reached for Isolde, then stopped himself before his hand closed around her. His voice cut through the shaking room. Isolde, refuse, if that is your will. The words struck the seal like a blade. Isolde understood. Refusal was not just a thought, it had to be spoken. She was trembling so hard she could barely stand. The princess might die. The court might collapse. Theron might lose everything his father had buried for him. But her body had already been used once. Because no one asked the child. She would not let fear answer for her now. Isolde lifted her scarred hand from the coffin. The room screamed. Virel smiled, thinking she had won. Then Isolde placed that hand over her own heart. I refuse, she said. The gold light stopped peeling from her scars. The coffin froze. Isolde's voice shook, but it did not break. I refuse to be a prison. The funeral glass walls cracked. I refuse to carry a life stolen into me by men who never knew my name. Auralyne's eyes filled with gold tears. And I refuse to let my scars be used as a grave. The funeral ledger burst open. The second seal shattered. From beneath the floor, behind the blood circle, a hidden compartment opened, with a sound like glass inhaling after 12 years. Inside lay a small red lily ring, and wrapped around it was a strip of black hair. Theron stared. His face went white, because the hair was not Auralyne's. It was his mother's. The strip of black hair lay wrapped around the red lily ring like a funeral ribbon. Theron did not move. The first sealing room trembled around him, blue flame licking through cracks in the walls. Gold light still burning under Isolde's scars. The coffin had stopped dragging her toward the blood circle, but the air remained tight with old magic, as if the room itself was waiting to see who would break first. Inside the glass, Princess Auralyne stared at the hidden compartment. Her face changed. Not surprise. Grief. Theron saw it. His voice came out colder than the room. Why is my mother's hair in a sealing chamber? Virel closed her eyes for one breath. When she opened them, the softness was gone. Only exhaustion remained, bitter and sharp. Because your mother knew. The words struck him like a blade. Isolde felt the impact through the coffin handle beneath her palm. Theron's dragon shadow recoiled against the wall, torn wings flaring, gold fire sputtering, as if the name of his mother had reached a wound deeper than his sick dragon. Queen Maid had died 1 year after Auralyne was sealed. The court said grief took her. Servants said she walked into the morning gardens one winter dawn and never came back warm. Theron's jaw tightened. Knew what? Virel lifted the cracked funeral glass dagger. Only an empty red stem remained inside the blade now. The petals gone, but the dagger still looked hungry. That Auralyne's blood could unmake your father's succession. That the funeral line was older than the throne line. That if Auralyne named a child, your father's claim would fracture. Auralyne pressed her palm to the glass. Marin tried to stop him. Theron looked at the princess. Auralyne's voice weakened, but did not fail. Your mother came after the first cut. She saw the child. She saw what they put inside her. She gave her hair to the seal because Caravan told her it would keep the child alive. Isolde stared at the ring. The child. Here, Theron's mother, had not saved her. Not fully, but she had stood in the room where Isolde was made into a vessel and left a piece of herself behind. Maybe mercy, maybe guilt, maybe both. In the dragon court, even pity came with chains. Theron took one step toward the compartment. Virel's dagger lifted. Touch it, and you wake the Queen's witness. His eyes narrowed. Meaning? The funeral ledger answered. Pages turned violently, until a new record appeared, written in thin black gold script. Queen Maid, bound as silent witness to the vessel seal. If the vessel refuses, the Queen's witness may speak. If the Queen's witness speaks, the sun must answer. The sun, Theron. The room went very still. Virel smiled then, not kindly. Do you see why your father buried this? It was never only Auralyne. It was your mother too. Every woman who tried to keep your crown clean was sealed into the lie that made you king. Theron's face hardened, but Isolde saw the pain beneath it. Virel saw it too, and pressed harder. You think standing beside the scarred maid makes you righteous? Your life was guarded by women cut into pieces. Your dragon sleeps because it knows the truth before you do. It refuses to wake for a throne, fed by their silence. Theron's dragon shadow shuddered. The words were cruel. Worse, they were close to true. Isolde felt him begin to pull away, not from her in disgust, but from the danger of needing anything from her. Kings who discovered they were built on harm often tried to become stone, because stone did not have to choose who to hurt next. She spoke before he disappeared behind that coldness. Do not let her turn truth into a knife she gets to hold. Theron looked at her. Virel's eyes flashed. Careful, Maid. You have refused prison once. Do not mistake that for wisdom. Isolde turned on her. Wisdom? You guarded a coffin while a living woman lay trapped inside it. You watched my scars carry what your dagger cut. If wisdom looks like you, I choose my scars. The coffin blazed. Auralyne smiled faintly through the glass. Virel's face twisted. Theron looked at the red lily ring again. What happens if my mother speaks? Auralyne's answer came softly. The seal will demand you choose. Choose what? The ledger page burned brighter. The sun must answer. Virel's voice dropped. Whether to restore Auralyne's life from the vessel, or let the vessel remain free and allow Auralyne to die. Isolde's breath stopped. There it was again, the cruelest shape of the law, her freedom against another woman's life. Theron's eyes closed briefly. When they opened, the fire in them was no longer tired. It was furious. At whom is the choice aimed? He asked. Virel frowned. What? At whom? His voice sharpened. If Isolde has already refused to be a prison, why does the seal ask me to choose? Auralyne's golden eyes brightened. Isolde understood a heartbeat later. The old law did not truly want Isolde's consent. It wanted Theron's command. If he chose Auralyne's restoration, the seal could use royal authority to override the vessel's refusal. If he chose Isolde's freedom, Auralyne's death would stain him. Either way, the court could call it the king's burden and hide the original crime beneath his answer. Virel's expression chilled. Theron stepped beside Isolde again. "I will not choose over her body." The ledger shook. "You must," Virel said. "No." The funeral glass walls groaned. Virel's voice rose. "If you refuse, both may be lost." Theron looked at Auralyne inside the coffin. "Princess, what do you choose?" The question struck the room harder than any spell. Auralyne's fingers trembled against the glass. No one had asked her either. Not when she was cut. Not when she was sealed. Not when her life was hidden inside a child. Not when her body was displayed for 12 years as royal grief. Her golden eyes filled with tears. "I choose," she whispered, "not to live by stealing back what was stolen into her." The coffin cracked. A single line split across the lid. Virel screamed, "No!" The red lily ring in the compartment flared, and the strip of Queen Marin's hair lifted into the air like black smoke. It twisted once, then became the shape of a woman's hand, pale and translucent, reaching toward Theron. He did not move. Isolde saw the child in him then, buried under armor and power, waiting for a mother who had vanished before she could explain what grief had cost. The ghostly hand touched his cheek. A woman's voice filled the ceiling room. "My son." Theron broke, only for a breath. But enough. Queen Marin's witness woke in the blue flames, her face forming above the red lily ring, sorrowful and severe, with the same black hair as Theron and the same exhausted gold in her eyes. "Forgive me," she whispered. "I thought leaving a piece of myself in the seal would protect the child. I did not know protection inside a prison was still prison." Isolde's scars warmed. "Not burning now. Listening." Marin turned to her. "And you, child, I failed to free. Your body owes my house nothing." The funeral ledger burst into gold light. The law tried to write another line. "The son must." Theron slammed his bleeding hand onto the page. "No," he said. "The son has answered." The words stopped. The room waited. Theron's voice lowered, every syllable sharp, with grief and choice. "My father's law will not use my mother's guilt, Auralyne's life, or Isolde's scars to keep ruling from the grave." The red lily ring cracked. Virel staggered back. Theron looked at Isolde, then at Auralyne. "I choose witness," he said. "Not possession, not restoration by theft, not freedom paid for by another woman's silence." The coffin lid split wider. Gold light poured out. Auralyne's body arched inside the glass, but this time Isolde did not feel her life being pulled away. The scars across her body opened like windows, releasing small fragments of gold light into the room. Not back into the coffin, into the air. Each fragment became a memory. Auralyne laughing in the garden. Auralyne arguing with Caravan. Auralyne shielding the furnace child. Auralyne bleeding beneath the red lily blade. Marin weeping over the seal. The room filled with witnesses. Virel backed toward the door. Her funeral glass dagger shook in her hand. Then the final red lily petal, the one buried in Isolde's arm, rose through her skin without pain. It floated between Isolde and the coffin. Auralyne looked at it and whispered, "The murder mark." The petal turned toward Virel, and the funeral glass dagger in her hand began to bleed. The funeral glass dagger began to bleed, not from its edge, from inside the blade. The red lily sealed within it, opened petal by petal, and dark gold blood seeped through the transparent glass, as if the weapon itself had become a wound. Virel stared at it in horror, fingers tightening around the hilt until the glass cut into her palm. The final petal floated between Isolde and the coffin, glowing with the same gold light that had burned beneath Isolde's scars for as long as she could remember. It did not return to Auralyne. It did not sink back into Isolde. It turned slowly toward Virel, like an eye that had finally found the hand that made it. Auralyne's voice came through the cracked coffin lid, weak but clear. "That blade remembers." Virel shook her head. "No." Theron stepped forward. His mother's witness still shimmered above the broken red lily ring, pale and sorrowful in the blue funeral fire. Around them, Auralyne's released memories hovered like small gold ghosts. The garden, the first sealing room, the child, the knife, Queen Merin's grief. The room was no longer only a chamber. It had become a court of the dead. Theron's gaze fixed on the dagger. "Then let it remember aloud." Virel moved to hide the blade behind her back. Isolde lifted her scowl hen. She did not know why. The petal answered. It flashed once, and every scar on her arm lit with the same shape, a red lily opening inside glass. The dagger screamed. The first sealing room vanished into a vision. This time, no dragon bone screen hid the truth. Princess Auralyne lay inside the gold blood circle, bound by funeral chain, her chest cut open by the red lily blade. Virel knelt beside her, younger, shaking, beautiful in the terrible way of someone still deciding what kind of monster she would become. Behind her stood Lord Funeral Regent Caravan Vere, Theron's father, wearing the red lily mourning ring. And beside him stood Queen Merin, alive, crying. Caravan's voice was cold. "Cut again." Virel's hands trembled. "If I cut deeper, she may die." She must not die. She must remain useful. Auralyne turned her head toward the child beside the circle. The little girl's left cheek had already been burned by scattered funeral light. She was sobbing without sound, too young to understand why pain had found her before she had a name. Isolde watched herself as a child and felt the room tilt. Theron's hand came near her elbow, then stopped, waiting. She did not lean into him, but she did not move away. In the vision, Queen Merin stepped forward. "Caravan, enough. You promised the child would only hold the excess life until Auralyne healed." Caravan turned on her. "Auralyne healing is the problem. She is your blood. She is a rival claim." Auralyne's voice broke from the floor. "I never wanted your throne." "No," Caravan said. "That is why the court would have loved you." The word struck Theron like a physical blow. Virel looked up at Caravan. "You said, if I helped seal her, the succession would stabilize. You said Theron would need someone loyal beside him." Caravan touched her cheek with the back of his hand, a gesture too gentle to be anything but manipulation. "And he will, once grief makes him king." Virel swallowed. "And Auralyne?" Caravan looked at the coffin waiting beside the circle. "She will become holy enough to silence." The vision shifted. The blade descended again. Auralyne screamed. Gold light tore from her body and scattered into the child's scars. But this time, as the dagger rose, blood splashed not only across the blade, it struck Virel's hand. The red lily inside the glass drank it. Auralyne's voice in the present chamber whispered, "Murder mark." The vision froze on Virel's hand, gripping the blade. Then it shattered. The first sealing room returned. Virel stood with the bleeding dagger exposed, her face stripped of softness. She looked not innocent, not fully guilty alone. Worse, she looked like someone who had once had a choice and had spent 12 years punishing everyone for the cost of making it. Theron's voice was low. "You cut her." Virel's lips parted. No answer came. Theron took one step closer. "You cut the child." Virel's eyes flashed toward Isolde. I did what your father commanded, and then you kept doing it after he died. That silenced her. The blue flames bent toward Virel. Queen Merin's witness looked at her with grief, not mercy. Virel's composure broke. Do you think I wanted this? I was chosen to preserve royal death, not to become servant to a half-dead princess in glass. Caravan swore the seal would last 1 year. 1 year, until the court accepted you. Then Auralyne could be released quietly into exile, and the child could be freed of what she carried. Isolde's throat tightened. 1 year. Her whole life had been built from a delay someone found convenient. Virel's laugh cracked. But your mother interfered. Auralyne would not weaken. The child survived. The coffin kept warming. And then Caravan died before teaching me how to undo it without destroying us all. You could have told me, Theron said. Virel stared at him. You were 16, half, mad with grief, surrounded by lords who would have carved you open to see whether your father's lie had entered your blood. I kept the coffin sealed because I wanted to live. The honesty was ugly. Isolde almost preferred the lies. Auralyne's eyes dimmed inside the coffin. And when the child grew? Virel looked at her. No answer. Isolde answered for her. I became easier to blame than free. The dagger bled harder. The funeral ledger opened again, pages turning to a blank line. The hand that cut must return what it marked. Virel looked at the words and went still. Theron read them aloud. The room seemed to tighten. Isolde felt every scar across her body warm, not with pain now, but with waiting. Auralyne's remaining life no longer pulled at her. Queen Merin's witness had already spoken. Theron had refused to choose over her body. Now, the law turned to the person who had wielded the blade. Virel backed away. No? Theron's dragon shadow rose behind him. What does it mean? Auralyne answered. The blade took pieces of my life and hid them in Isolde's scars. The hand that marked her must open the scars without owning what comes out. Virel's face drained. It will take my hand. Isolde looked at Virel's fingers wrapped around the funeral glass dagger. The same hand had cut Auralyne. The same hand had scarred a nameless child. The same hand had guarded the lie for 12 years. Virel looked at Theron. If I lose my hand, I cannot keep the coffin stable. Theron's expression did not move. You are no longer keeper of this coffin. The words landed like a sentence. Virel turned to Isolde then, and for the first time, she did not speak to a maid, a vessel, or a scar. She spoke to the woman she had wounded. If I do this, Virel whispered, you may release more than memory. You may release Auralyne's death. Isolde looked at the princess in the coffin. Auralyne held her chaser. There was fear there, but no demand. That gave Isolde the answer. Then we release truth first, Isolde said, and let no one use death to make me obedient again. The coffin blazed gold. Theron stepped beside Isolde, not in front of her. Virel stared at them both. Then, shaking, she placed the bleeding funeral glass dagger against the glowing scar on Isolde's arm. The room held its breath. Isolde did not look away. Virel cut. Gold light poured out. Gold light poured out. It did not spill like blood. It unfolded. From the cut in Isolde's scar, a memory rose in strands of fire. A child's hand gripping the edge of a funeral table. Princess Auralyne's scream breaking against sealed glass. Queen Merin, whispering prayers that no priest had taught her. Virel's young face streaked with tears as the red lily blade carved life into a body too small to understand sacrifice. Isolde staggered, but she did not fall. Theron's hand moved toward her. He stopped before touching. The restraint almost hurt more than the wound. I am here, he said. Not command, not rescue, presence. Isolde held onto that while the first scar opened fully. The gold light drifted from her arm into the air. and formed a small image of Princess Auralyne standing in a sunlit courtyard, younger and alive, laughing as a black dragon hatchling curled around her feet. The dragon hatchling lifted its head toward the vision of Theron, and the king's own dragon shadow trembled behind him. Auralyne watched from inside the coffin, tears sliding from the corners of her open eyes. "That was before," she whispered. The memory dissolved. Virel's hand shook around the funeral glass dagger. Blood ran from her palm, where the blade had cut her as deeply as it had cut Isolde's scar. Already, the fingers of that hand had begun to turn transparent, veins glowing red beneath the skin. The law was taking its price. The hand that marked must return what it marked. Virel looked down, terror tightening her mouth. "It is not enough," the funeral ledger answered by turning another page. "Every scar." Isolde went cold. Theron stepped toward the ledger. "No." Virel laughed once, broken and breathless. "The law is finally honest, Your Majesty. You wanted her free. Freedom wants all of its wounds opened." Isolde looked at her arms, her collarbone, the hidden scars beneath the plain black dress, the pale lightning line down her face. Every mark she had spent her life hiding was not merely damage. Each one was a chamber. Each one held a piece of Auralyne's stolen life, a fragment of witness, a shard of a woman trapped in glass, and a child made into a prison. Every scar, her body swayed. Auralyne pressed her palm to the cracked coffin lid. "Isolde, you do not have to—" "Yes," Isolde said. The words surprised even her. Theron turned sharply. She met his eyes, though fear shook through every breath. "I refuse to be a prison. That means opening the doors. It may kill you. Then ask me if I choose it." His face changed. Pain, fury, respect, and something more dangerous moved beneath the surface. Something that had been growing since the coffin woke. Not love yet. Not safely. But the kind of devotion that begins as terror at another person's courage. He swallowed. "Do you choose it?" Isolde looked at Auralyne. The princess did not plead. That was why Isolde could answer. "Yes," she said. "But not for the throne, not for the court, not even for her alone." She touched the scar on her face, for the child who never got to know why she hurt. The coffin blazed. The blue funeral flames bowed. Virel closed her eyes as if the answer had condemned them all. Then she cut the second scar. Gold light burst from Isolde's shoulder, and another memory opened. Queen Marin bending over the nameless child after the sealing, wrapping her burned body in a strip of royal mourning cloth, while Caravan ordered the guards to take the child to the furnace rooms. "She cannot remain near the coffin," Caravan said. Marin's voice broke. "She will die. Then she will take the excess with her. She is a child. She is a vessel." The memory burned away. Theron's dragon shadow roared soundlessly against the wall. "My father gave you to the furnaces," he said. Isolde's voice came thin. "Your father never gave me anything. He threw me away." Theron flinched. Not from blame, from truth. Virel cut the third scar, then the fourth. With every cut, her hand faded more, but Isolde's body shook harder. Memories filled the sealing room until it became difficult to breathe. Auralyne refusing to sign away a claim she never wanted. Caravan telling the council that dead women were easier to honor than living ones. Virel kneeling alone beside the coffin years later, whispering that she did not know how to undo it. Queen Marin placing a kiss on Isolde's scarred brow, before vanishing from court records forever. The scar across Isolde's face remained. The oldest, the worst, the one everyone saw first and never looked beyond. Virel stared at it, dagger, trembling. "No," she whispered. Isolde's throat tightened. "Why not?" Virel looked at Auralyne. The princess inside the coffin had gone still. Too still. Auralyne answered softly. Because that is where they hit my final breath. Theron turned to the coffin. If it is released, I wake, Auralyne whispered. Or ID. The room became silent. Isolde felt the old fear return, but it no longer owned the whole of her. The scars across her body had opened into light. Her arms felt light and raw. Her shoulder burned. Her chest ached with memories that were not hers, but no longer trapped inside her. Only her face remained. The mark that had made children stare, servants pity her, nobles recoil, and Varel call her damaged without saying the word. Final breath, Theron faced Isolde. You do not owe anyone that scar. The words entered her quietly. She had never thought of a scar as something she could own. Auralyne's voice shook. He is right. Isolde looked at the princess in the coffin, at the gold eyes that had called her stolen blood, then learned to say her name. If I keep it, what happens to you? Auralyne smiled faintly through tears. Then one breath of me remains with you, not as prison, as gift, if you choose to carry it. Varel's fading hand lowered. The dagger's red lily glowed against the blue flame. For once, no one in the room moved to decide for Isolde. Not the king, not the princess, not the funeral keeper, not the dead queen's witness. The choice stood naked before her, terrifying because it was truly hers. Isolde lifted her hand to the scar on her face. All her life, she had thought it was the ugliest thing about her. Now she knew it had held a breath that was never meant to be stolen, a breath that had survived cruelty, burial, furnace, ash, and 12 years of being called a curse. She looked at Auralyne. I will not carry a prison, she said, but I can carry a breath. The coffin's gold light softened. Auralyne closed her eyes. The final scar did not open. It warmed. The funeral ledger shook, then wrote a new line beneath the old law. The vessel has chosen what remains. Varel collapsed to her knees. Her dagger hand was gone to the wrist now, not severed, but turned into clear funeral glass filled with red veins. She stared at it with hollow horror. The hand that marked had returned what it marked. Almost all. Theron looked at Auralyne. Can the coffin open? The princess inhaled. This time, the whole room heard it. A true breath. The gold clasps, shaped like dragon claws, unlocked one by one. The coffin lid cracked upward. Blue funeral flame turned gold. Isolde stepped back as Princess Auralyne Vere sat up inside the glass coffin for the first time in 12 years. Alive, not whole, not healed, but no longer silent. The court above began to scream as the morning mirrors shattered one by one, carrying the truth back through the palace. Auralyne looked at Varel, then at Theron, then at Isolde. My blood was stolen into you, she said, but the choice that freed me was yours. Theron stood beside the scarred Maid as the first sealing room opened to every watching flame, and above them, in the hall of mourning, the execution arch cracked down the center. The execution arch cracked down the center, far above the first sealing room, in the hall of mourning. Every noble heard it break. The sound traveled through funeral mirrors, burial stairs, dragonbone walls, and blue flame, carrying the truth faster than any herald could soften it. The arch had stood for 300 years, carved with the skulls of condemned traitors, grave thieves, oath-breakers, and servants whose names had never mattered enough to survive the blade. Isolde had scrubbed dried blood from beneath it until her fingers split in winter. Now, it cracked, because the woman it had waited to kill had refused to carry another woman's death into it. Princess Auralyne sat upright inside the open glass coffin, one hand pressed to her chest, breathing as though every breath had to be remembered before it could be trusted. Her skin was pale, her lips colorless, her body still dressed in the white burial gown that had made the court worship her as a beautiful corpse. But her eyes were gold and open, and when she turned her head, the blue flames bowed. Isolde stood a few steps away, trembling so badly she could feel her knees threaten to fold. Most of the scars across her body had gone quiet after releasing their stolen fragments. They ached now, raw and hollow, as if doors had been opened in places she had spent her life pretending were only wounds. Only the scar across her face remained warm, not burning, breathing. Auralyne looked at it with tears in her eyes. You kept the final breath. Isolde touched the pale line from temple to jaw. I chose to. The words felt strange, too simple for what they meant. Varel knelt on the blood-carved floor, her dagger hand transformed into clear funeral glass to the wrist. Red veins twisted inside it, like lily roots trapped beneath ice. She stared at the hand, as if she could still command it by hatred alone. Theron stood between Varel and the coffin, but not between Isolde and the room. That mattered now, more than any vow. His dragon shadow filled the sealing chamber, no longer torn in silence, no longer dimmed by the coffin's theft. It was still wounded, but awake enough for gold fire to thread through its wings. Queen Marin's witness shimmered above the broken red lily ring, fading slowly. Theron looked at his mother's ghost. Did you know Auralyne could live? Marin's face tightened with grief. I hoped. I did not know. Hope made me too willing to trust a prison if it promised the child would survive. Her gaze moved to Isolde. I called it protection because I could not bear to call it failure. Isolde did not answer quickly. Part of her wanted anger. Part of her wanted to forgive, because the queen looked broken, and because forgiving powerful sorrow was what servants were often trained to do. But she was tired of giving clean endings to people who had left her with jagged ones. You left me in the furnace rooms, she said. Marin closed her eyes. Yes, you knew I lived. Yes, you never came back. The ghost's voice broke. No. The chamber went silent. Theron lowered his head, not to hide from the truth, but to let it stand without royal defense. Isolde looked at the queen's witness and felt the final breath in her face scar warm. Then do not ask me to make that gentle. Marin opened her eyes. I will not. The word settled over the room. Not forgiveness. Something cleaner. Record. Auralyne slowly climbed from the coffin. Theron moved as if to help, then stopped himself. Auralyne saw and gave him a faint smile. You may offer your arm, nephew. I'm no longer made of law. His face changed. Pain and relief crossed it together as he offered his arm. Auralyne took it, unsteady but upright. When her bare feet touched the floor outside the coffin, the gold blood circle beneath her cracked apart. The funeral ledger lifted from its stand and opened to a new page. Princess Auralyne Vere. Living witness. Isolde Vale. Scarred maid. Stolen blood. Vessel by force. Chooser by right. Queen Marin Vere. Silent witness. Failed protector. Lady Varel. Funeral keeper. Blade hand. Preserver of false death. Lord Funeral Regent Caravan Vere. Author of the Vessel Seal. Theron read every line. He did not skip his father's name. Varel laughed softly from the floor. There. A beautiful list. What will you do with it? Read it to the court? Let them watch the princess breathe and still ask whether your throne is lawful. Let them wonder whether the scarred maid carries enough royal funeral blood to stand above half their daughters. Auralyne's eyes sharpened. Still trying to make truth sound like disorder. It is disorder, Varel snapped. You think waking changes that? Your bloodline will fracture the court. Her scars will become banners. His father's crime will stain his reign. I kept one lie alive, because one lie was easier to govern than 10 truths. Theron's voice came cold. You did not govern grief. You fed on it. Varel rose unsteadily, lifting her glass hand. And you inherited it? The strike landed. Theron did not deny it. No crown comes clean from a sealed coffin. he said, "so mine will answer where it benefited." The ledger burned brighter. The first ceiling room doors opened by themselves, not only toward the burial stairs, but toward every funeral mirror in the palace. Above them, the hall of mourning appeared in reflection. Nobles crowded beneath shattered blue lamps, priests frozen with ash bowls in their hands, guards staring at the cracked execution arch. The court saw Auralyne alive. They saw Varel's glass hand. They saw Isolde standing with her face scar glowing softly, no chains on her wrists, no coffin forcing her forward. A noble lord shouted through the mirror, "Your Majesty, step away from the vessel!" Theron turned toward the reflection. His dragon rose behind him in gold fire. "Her name is Isolde Vala." The hall went silent. He continued, "She was made vessel by a crime of this house. She is not property of the coffin, the princess, the funeral law, or the crown." The funeral mirrors carried every word. Varel's expression twisted. Theron looked at the court above. "Princess Auralyne lives. My father authored the seal that split her life and hid part of it inside a child. Queen Mairen witnessed and failed to free that child. Lady Varel wielded the blade, kept the false death, and attempted to use funeral law to silence the woman it wounded." The noble stood frozen. Truth, Isolde realized, did not always roar. Sometimes it simply left people with nowhere respectable to look. Auralyne stepped beside Theron, one hand still on his arm. "I do not seek to steal the throne from the boy who was crowned over my coffin." Murmurs erupted. She raised her voice, fragile but firm. "But I will not let my death remain the foundation of his rule." The ledger wrote her words across the mirror glass. Theron bowed his head. "Nor will I." He removed the dark gold band from his brow and placed it on the coffin lid. The entire hall of mourning gasped. "I will not wear a crown in a court that still calls its victims vessels," he said, "until every funeral seal made under Caravan's law is opened, until every servant child marked by burial glass is found, until Auralyne speaks freely before the court without being used as a claim or threat. I rule crownless under witness." Isolde stared at him. He had not chosen her over the kingdom in some beautiful, reckless way the court could later use against her. He had chosen truth in front of the kingdom and refused to make her the price of it. That was harder, better. Virelle sank back to her knees. The funeral chains uncoiled from the walls and wrapped around her glass hand, then her wrist, then the arm that had held the blade. She did not scream. Her face had gone empty, as if the purpose keeping her upright had finally left. Theron looked down at her. "You will not be executed." Virelle's eyes flicked up, wary. "You will serve in the opened mourning rooms," he said. "Every coffin sealed by my father's law will be brought before you. You will name the rite used, the blade used, the witness silenced, and the body harmed. If you hide one truth, the glass in your hand will spread." Virelle looked at Isolde, not pleading, not sorry enough, but aware finally that the scarred maid she had tried to turn into a tomb would now stand as witness over her sentence. Isolde said quietly, "And the servants marked by glass?" Theron looked to her, not answering over her, waiting. Isolde felt the warmth in her face scar, the final breath Auralyne had allowed her to keep as gift. They should choose whether to open what was hidden in them. No court, no priest, no king decides for them. Auralyne nodded. "Yes." Theron turned to the mirror court. "So it will be." The funeral ledger accepted the decree. Above them, the execution arch cracked fully apart and fell in two clean halves. No one died beneath it. No blood spilled. It simply collapsed into dust, an old mouth finally unable to pronounce another sentence. By nightfall, the glass coffin was carried back into the hall of mourning, not by Isolde alone, not toward the execution arch. Theron carried one side. Auralyne weak but standing, touched the other. Isolde walked beside them, not bearing the coffin this time, but guiding it. Servants lined the corridor in silence. Some cried when they saw her unchained. Some touched their own scars beneath sleeves and collars, suddenly afraid of what old pain might contain. In the hall, the coffin was placed beneath the shattered blue lamps, empty. The sight changed the room more than Auralyne's body had. A coffin, without a princess inside it. A death, without its prisoner. Isolde stood before it, and felt every eye on her face. For once, she did not turn the scar away. Theron approached only after the hall had emptied to witnesses and guards. "You kept her final breath," he said. "I chose what remains," Isolde answered. "Yes." He stopped at a careful distance. The restraint still mattered, perhaps always would. "You may leave the palace," he said. "You may stay. You may stand with Auralyne as witness. You may refuse all of it. I will not place another law on your scars." Isolde looked at the empty coffin, then at the princess seated nearby, alive under a healer's cloak, then at Varel, bound in glass chain, staring at the first opened funeral record. Finally, she looked at Theron, and "If I stay until the other marked servants are found," his amber eyes held hers, "then I will ask what you need. Not what the coffin needs. No, not what your throne needs." His answer came quietly. No. The warmth in her scar softened. Not romance yet, not safely, but the first road toward something that did not require her to be smaller, prettier, quieter, or grateful for being spared. "I will stay until the marked are found," she said. "After that, I choose again." Theron bowed his head. "After that, you choose again." Behind them, Auralyne took her first full breath outside the coffin and began to weep. The blue funeral flames turned gold, and for the first time in 12 years, the hall of mourning did not smell like preserved death. It smelled like air after glass breaks.